Hi, and welcome to another edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the Olympus Zuiko 100mm 2.8 lens. This is a lens that was introduced in the 1970s for the Olympus OM1 film camera. 100 or 105mm has always been my favorite lens for portraits. So let's go over the specifications for this lens, and then we're going to look at some pictures. Okay, so it has an aperture range of 2.8 to f/22 in full stops. There's no half click stops on this lens. Has a minimum focus of 3.3 feet or 1 meter. There's 5 elements in 5 groups. It has 6 aperture blades. It weighs a light 8.1 ounces or 235 grams. It has a length of only 1.9 inches or 48 millimeters. I mean, that's in normal lens territory. That's 50 millimeter lens territory. It takes 49 millimeter filters. Now, let's look at it compared to the Nikon 105 millimeter 2.5. That was my go-to portrait lens for years. And it's an excellent lens. So just look at the size comparison here. On the left, we have the Olympus at 1.9 inches long and the Nikkor at 3.1. Weight difference, 8 ounces for the Olympus, where the Nikon weighs 15 ounces. Now here they are, both shown on an adapter for use on Nikon Z mirrorless cameras. The Photossi adapter on the left for the Olympus, and Nikon's F to Z adapter for Nikon F mount lenses on the Nikon Z camera. I shot this lens on my Nikon Z8, and you see it here mounted on the Z8, and use focus peaking for focusing. It works really great on the Z8. Now, of course, there's no CPU in this lens, so on the Z8, you do need to set non-CPU lens data for the vibration reduction to work correctly. Now, recently I went over to a friend's house to shoot some video with my Z6 of his Lionel Trains, and I decided to bring the Z8 and the 100mm 2.8 Zuiko lens to take some still images of the trains. I used the 13mm extension tube for some of the pictures, and some of those you see here. These were shot at 5.6 with that 13mm tube, and I think the sharpness is really good. Here's another one, this black engine, also shot with the 13mm tube, and it has good sharpness, of course, very limited depth of field. These were all done on a tripod. This one was at f8 of this red Santa Fe train. And then finally with the tube, I shot this picture of the caboose, also at f8. And this works out really good with extension tubes for close-up pictures. I then took off the extension tube and did some shots of his layout and some additional trains. Distance varied from 3.5 feet to 8 feet. For some, of course, for some of the wider shots, but the 100mm lens really isolates things, has really good sharpness, great color, as you can see here. These were all done on the V8, as I said, using focus peaking, which works out really good with manual focus lenses on the Nikon Z8. And I had the camera set for standard picture control and auto white balance. I did use a little bounce flash on some of these, set to -1 exposure compensation, and that kind of lights up the background a little. And when you turn flash on in a situation like this, even outdoors, if you use fill flash, it kind of warms the pictures up and gives you, a nice warmer color balance, which I usually prefer. So after shooting the trains, I went home, and over the weekend, a friend's daughter was over playing with our cat, and these are at 2.8, again, manually focused. The same thing here of the little girl focused on her eyes at 2.8, very little depth of field. This was near the minimum focusing distance. We then went outside and shot some more. Many of these were at 2.8. I also shot some at f4 and 5.6. And what I noticed with this lens, and I was very careful, and she stayed still. She was a good model. She didn't move. So, sometimes with kids, they're moving around, and it's difficult to manually focus. But what I did notice with this lens is as I stopped down, the eye seemed just as sharp as it did at 2.8 as I went to 4 and 5.6 and even f8. Of course, the depth of field increased. So this lens is very, very usable at 2.8. I wouldn't hesitate to use it at that aperture in any situation. So we just tried to get, a little variety of shots here. It was a sunny day, but I put up actually a background to block the sun. So I didn't want that direct sun on her. I used no flash for these images. And like I said, I'm very pleased. This last one here was at 5.6. I then pointed the camera up at some trees. This first image here was at 2.8, and I really didn't notice any chromatic aberration. This one was at f4. Of course, the sky wasn't that bright. Maybe if it was brighter, I would have seen some chromatic aberration. And this one was at 5.6. Trees are a good subject to test the sharpness of a lens, and these evergreens here look very sharp, even out to the edges. I then went back inside and shot this pumpkin that was painted by my son's very talented girlfriend, and this was at 5.6 by window light. Then went right outside the front door, and these creatures here that are set up outside, this one here is at 2.8. Focus was on the one on the left. I then stopped down to f4, and then finally in this last shot coming up right here, I was at 5.6. And again, as I said earlier, sharpness stayed the same on the one that was focused on, just there was an increase, of course, in depth of field. Now some flowers at 5.6, close to the minimum focusing distance. I was just trying to find some additional things to shoot, and I shot some pictures of the car in the driveway, the front end, again, at 5.6. The 100 really isolates things. I then went around to the back of the car, and again, really good sharpness and enough depth of field for the subject. This pumpkin, the focus was on the stem, and it's extremely sharp right on at the point where I focused at 5.6. Then I saw the cat in the door, and this isn't the sharpest picture, but not because of the lens, but because of me. I knew Trudy wouldn't stay there long, so I focused really quickly, and like I said, it could have been sharper. This is a situation where autofocus really would have come in handy, but I really like this shot of the cat. As I've said many times, I really like using manual focus lenses on mirrorless cameras. And the Z8, in my experience of the mirrorless cameras that I have used, the Nikon Z8 is the best so far with the excellent focus peaking, making it very easy to focus these vintage lenses. Okay, so that's it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I come out with a new video every Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below or send me an email. I will talk to you next time.